fluoride level in mother's milk is incredibly low. You know, I learned that fact on July 6, 1996, the first day of my involvement. And when I saw that, I said, this can't be right. Do the dentists really know more about what the baby needs than Mother Nature? We heard a spin artist on the radio station yesterday actually intimating that they did know more about what the baby needs, that mother's breast milk is somehow deficient and they have to make up for it, which is, I believe, absolutely nonsense. But the key thing is that a bottle-fed baby in Portland, if you fluoridate at 0.7, is going to get 175 times more fluoride than nature intended, 175 times more than a breastfed baby. Now, it's well established that fluoride interferes with the growing tooth cells and causes this condition called dental fluorosis. That is a systemic effect. It's an effect that takes place inside the body. The fluoride is interfering with the enzymes and proteins which make the enamel. And the gamble is that you can do that to the growing tooth cells and not touch anything else in the body when that fluoride is flowing through. That is a reckless gamble in my mind. Next, according to the Center of Disease Control, let me backtrack. When they started fluoridation, they thought that 10% of kids would get dental fluorosis. But they didn't care because it was very mild. It was just white specks that they thought that no one would notice. 10%. Now the Center of Disease Control admits that 41% of American children, 12 to 15, this is the average of all children, whether they live in a fluoridated or a non-fluoridated community, because we're getting fluoride from many other sources, have dental fluorosis. So they're 4 times more than their goal. And this dental fluorosis that we're getting today is not just very mild. 8.6% of these figures are mild, and 3.6% are moderate or severe. Mild dental fluorosis impacts 50% of the surface of the tooth, and moderate or severe affects 100% of the tooth. And tell a child who has moderate or severe dental fluorosis that this is not a problem, it's just a cosmetic effect. Because these children do not want to smile, they do not want to open their mouths on their first date. It's a source of intense embarrassment and psychological damage. Next. According to the CDC, Black and Mexican American children have higher rates of dental fluorosis than whites. Next. Pam Dembeston on lessons from dental fluorosis. She is one of the world's experts on dental fluorosis. She said, we can certainly see that fluoride impacts the way proteins interact with mineralized tissue. So what effect is it having elsewhere at the cellular level? Fluoride is very powerful and it needs to be treated respectfully. And that was quoted in Scientific American, January of 2008. A good document, actually, to give to people that wonder if you're Looney Tunes. Next. It is reckless to assume that when fluoride is damaging the growing tooth cells, it's not damaging anything else. Next. Several lines of evidence indicate that fluoride can damage the brain, and I'll be going into that in a moment, a little bit later. I'm only going to focus on this one issue, because the evidence is very strong, and if we can prove this one point, fluoridation should end immediately. Next. The benefits of swallowing fluoride have been wildly exaggerated. Even fluoridation promoters now agree that the major benefit is topical, not systemic. The Center for Disease Control conceded that in 1999, and that should have been the point when fluoridation ended. Because if fluoride works topically, then, and if fluoridated toothpaste is universally available, why expose every tissue in the body to a known toxic substance? And when you can apply it directly to the teeth and spit it out, and why force it on people that don't want it? It's just common sense. This simple fact about it working topically, not systemically, they got this wrong for 50 years. They got it wrong for 50 years. explains probably why today you cannot see a difference in tooth decay between fluoridated communities and non-fluoridated communities, fluoridated states and non-fluoridated states, fluoridated countries and non-fluoridated countries. The bigger the study, the less likely they are to find that fluoride actually reduces tooth decay. It's only when they cherry-pick the data, as they've done here, with a bogus comparison between Portland, or rather Oregon and Washington State, can they pretend that there is a difference. But, as I said, that is cherry-picking, and the science doesn't bear scrutiny on that. Next. The chemicals used to fluoridate are not pharmaceutical grade. They're not the kind of fluoride that you get in toothpaste. They are, in fact, the products of the scrubbing systems of the phosphate fertilizer industry. The spray of water captures two very toxic gases. And these chemicals, these fluoridated chemicals, contain a lot of other contaminants. One of them is arsenic. Now, arsenic is a known human carcinogen. And for the US EPA, there is no safe level of a human carcinogen. Any amount can increase your cancer risk. So inevitably, when you're using industrial-grade fluoridating chemicals to fluoridate your water, you are going to increase the cancer rates of your community, of your country. There's no argument about that. The only argument would be to two people in risk assessment to calculate just what the increased cancer risk would be. But you will increase the cancer risk, period. And that's over and beyond the fact that fluoride might also be a carcinogen. Next. The science underpinning promoters' claims of safety and effectiveness, next, is extremely poor. It was a shock to us when we had the three authors sat down and looked at the literature in some detail. The four examples of bad science. One, there's not been a single randomized clinical trial to establish that fluoride or fluoridation is either effective or safe. This is the standard procedure that the FDA uses to approve new drugs. This is the most prescribed drug in American history. Today it's going to over 200 million people every day in uncontrolled doses through their water and through food that's made up with it, etc. The FDA has never approved it for ingestion. It remains an unapproved drug. Another flabbergasting fact in a whole host of flabbergasting facts. In 67 years since fluoridation began, there's been little to no monitoring of our exposure. There's no been monitoring, no systematic monitoring of the fluoride levels in our bones, even though we know that 50% of the fluoride we take in each day accumulates in our bones. No measure in the urine, and urine is a good measure of daily exposure, or in our blood, so critical for when you get into the biochemistry. None of that is being monitored, which is incredible. Next. Even when harm has been demonstrated in other countries, countries which do not have a fluoridation program to protect, countries like India and China, which have high natural levels, there has been no attempt to replicate these studies in the United States or any other fluoridating country. It's absolutely amazing. They put all their effort into critiquing the methodologies of studies that have found harm, but none into actually doing the studies themselves. Next, even though it's well established that the severity of dental fluorosis is a good indicator of how much fluoride the child has been exposed to before their permanent teeth have been erupted. So you've got this wonderful non-invasive biomarker which should make any epidemiologist have an instant orgasm. I mean, after all, you have millions of children with no dental fluorosis, very mild dental fluorosis, mild dental fluorosis, moderate dental fluorosis, and probably not millions, but thousands with severe dental fluorosis. So you've got the x-axis beautifully. So now the y-axis, you could look at any health concern with children that you can think of and see if there's any relationship between the severity of dental fluorosis. Not once has this been done in America. Next. Instead of science, promoters use endorsements. Next. Here's the list of endorsements from the ADA. The ADA says all these organizations endorse fluoridation. But how many of these organizations have researched the issue themselves? How many have done that recently? How many, for example, have looked at the IQ studies that is very important right now? Next. Oh, whoa, go back. Endorsements are a good way to sell shoes, but not a good way to determine public health policy. You know. Many Americans might find these endorsements impressive, but clearly they didn't impress the vast majority of countries in the world, because the vast majority of countries in the world do not fluoridate their water, which includes most of Europe. Now, most of Europe has equivalent organizations, professional bodies, doctors, physicians, pediatricians, etc., as we have in America. So apparently all the things which are supposed to be so convincing to Randy Leonard and crew have not convinced these professional bodies in most of the world. In fact, over half the people drinking fluoridated water live in the United States. And as far as portraying Portland as being behind the times, if I was to start reading to you a list of cities in the world that do not fluoridate their water, Portland would be prouder to be in that list than in the list that is there. In Europe, 97% of the population of Western Europe is not drinking fluoridated water. These countries are not fluoridated. Some of them started but stopped. 4 of them have fluoridated salt. But the majority have neither fluoridated water nor fluoridated salt. Rick North told me today that maybe Spain also has fluoridated salt. So maybe it's fine. The most frequently cited endorsement is from the CDC. And the statement goes as follows, and you must have seen it many, many times. Every time I see it, I want to throw up. Fluoridation is one of the 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. I want to say this. Those who so glibly trot this out, editors of your papers, journalists, public health officials, Randy Leonard and crew, are going to be so embarrassed when they really see what this statement is and where it came from. It came from not the Centre of Disease Control, the total body of 18,000 people. It came from 30 people, the Oral Health Division. Let me be more specific. The report on which that statement is based was published in 1999. It was not externally peer-reviewed. It was an internal House document. It was written by 2 people, Scott Tomar, who's a dentist who had never written anything on fluoridation before this, and Susan Griffin, an economist. Next, the reports, okay, they may have done really diligent study, and so we shouldn't hold their lack of credentials on this against them. But we can hold the content against them, because if you look at it, they dismiss health effects in one sentence and rely on a review that was already 6 years out of date when they published this report. The National Research Council report of 1993. It's ironic that the same body, the National Research Council, has reported a report in 2006, and talk about a double standard. Here's this duo relying on this to dismiss health effects, but when the NRC 2006 comes back with a whole litany of health concerns, they dismiss that as not being relevant to water fluoridation. The evidence of benefit was laughable. Next, there's only one figure in this study, and it's this. And this figure shows DMFT, tooth decay, in 12-year-olds coming down from the 60s to the 90s. And on the same graph, you see a red line. That red line is going up. Is it the sale of bicycles, telephone books? No, this is the percentage of the American population drinking fluoridated water. So voila! The blue line is coming down because the red line is going up. Now, before you believe that nonsense, They could have easily gone to the World Health Organization and seen what was happening to tooth decay over the same period in non-fluoridated countries. Next, here it is. Next. There. There are 12 countries here which are non-fluoridated, one that has 10% fluoridation, and 4 that are fluoridated. They're all coming down. Tooth decay was coming down in all those countries from the 60s and the 90s. So to ascribe the reduction in the United States to water fluoridation is either incompetence, because they couldn't be bothered to see what the worldwide figures were, or it was fraud. It was deception. It was public relations.